Hey, welcome back to the Prologue. I'm Coach Mike with Durner Performance.
And I'm Larry Foss, head coach at the Fix Studio. Today we are going to talk about
training zones.
And different kinds of training zones.
Yeah.
I use basically three different training zones. I use a heart rate training zone for some athletes. I do power, obviously, and an RPE training zone.
Yeah, I use the same three, but a lot of times I am combining
hybrids.
The RPE with heart rate or the RPE with power, and also the conversational training zone, like adding that one in. Like, can you talk? How many words can you say? How many sentences can you say in a row?
Sure. I mean, there's been a lot of study. I'll tell you, I love doing lactate testing. I'm weird. I really enjoy doing it. I do it on myself. I do it on my wife. I do it on athletes. But they've shown that if you can speak a full sentence, you're probably going to be in zone 2.
Yeah.
But I like having the data behind it. But I've never seen it. Different. Like, if you can still talk, you are going to be in zone 2.
Yeah. Yeah, you are. Or you've just started into the next zone or 2 zones up. Which that's a good little segue. 2 zones up. There's just you and I both use Training Peaks. There's a plethora of different like zones that you can pick from or calculations that you can pick from in Training Peaks.
I think we counted them a couple weeks ago. I think it was like over 100.
Well, yeah. So
between all sports.
There's just for heart rate, I have it up right now. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15 different combinations of heart rate zones that you can pick from. I know it's more for heart rate than it is for power. And then it can get confusing because like all these different entities that created the zones, whether they're USA Cycling or USA Triathlon or Andy Coggan or Joe Friel or
there's a bazillion of them.
Terminology is just slightly different in all of them, and that can get confusing for athletes, and it's certainly confusing for me sometimes. I'm like, what do you?
I personally, I've used long ago, almost 20 years ago, when the training and racing with power came out. There were already starting to be like 5 or 6 different zones or different models for the zones. Each of them was like their threshold zone maybe went up to 104, and one went up to 105, one went up to 106, and it maybe started at 88% or 90% or 92%, and just based on consistency, I picked the Coggan model, and I have not wavered when I'm using power from that. That's just what I do. Because I want to make it as simple as possible, because a percentage here and a percentage here really isn't going to make much physiological difference. It's just not.
Yeah, I'm very much the same way. I use Coggan. We talked about, like, when we counted them up a couple weeks ago, I was doing the math and realized, it's just a couple percentage points off from most of the other big ones. And then when I'm prescribing, I'm usually just going off of the percentage of FTP. Where do I want this to be, knowing the event that an athlete is training for, or what phase of training we're in. I'm just going to use that percentage and I'm just picking a combination of zones based on TSS that I'm looking for more than anything.
Yeah. I'll often do TSS, but I have some athletes that I'll use kilojoules of work.
Mm-hmm.
How many kilojoules of work have you done? And that could trigger something. It could be kilojoules per day. It could be kilojoules per week. It just varies. But I do want to stay consistent with my zones, just because it's the keep it simple, stupid. That whole KISS thing. Yeah. With heart rate, I know that there's a million of those heart rate zones. I tend to use just basically a three zone model, just for simplicity.
Mm-hmm.
RPE is RPE. I don't even consider necessarily a zone with RPE.
Yeah.
And then what about after threshold? What happened?
Man, this is one of my favorite things, like, because especially on the bike, and even more so for well-trained runners, a little bit than a new runner or new cyclist. The over threshold, there are so many layers to that you can delve into. Like, how long are you spending over threshold? That's going to determine a lot.
Yeah.
For both power and perceived effort versus heart rate. Because heart rate, once you're over threshold, you're getting pretty close to your max heart rate, and it's going to either stay there or come down a little bit.
Yeah.
Based on your effort. And
you also have to start factoring in cardiac drift, and man, it starts getting heart rate. Heart rate, I feel like, is really important for the lower, everything under threshold.
I agree.
Once you get above threshold, I think the way I look at it is heart rate it goes from, when I'm doing endurance work, heart rate is my primary number that I'm worried about.
Mm-hmm.
And the power is the secondary number. And then when I get over threshold or above, power becomes the primary number and heart rate becomes the secondary number, because there's still value in the heart rate.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's definitely still.
Which, man, I've been doing this for a while, and I remember when we used to do everything by speed,
mm-hmm.
and then we went from speed to, then we started using RPE, and then heart rate came, and everything was based on heart rate.
Yeah,
that was the only, we didn't care about speed, we didn't care about the RPE, we only cared about the heart rate. And then power came, and then we didn't care about any of those other things. We only cared about power. And we found that, oh wow, we're really missing out on the RPE
mm-hmm.
and the heart rate. When you start looking at them all in unison, man, that's when you start really having some powerful analytical data.
Yeah, and how they interact. So I like to see how heart rate changes with power or RPE. Like at the end of an interval, how quickly is heart rate coming down? That can be a really good indicator of how fit an athlete is. And if they're fatigued, like how long does it take to get up to where we expect it to be?
Yeah.
If it's really slow, maybe we need to back things off.
Yeah. Because your heart rate can definitely start getting depressed if you start overtraining. So overreaching.
Right. And so under recovering, we'll just start throwing words that mean similar things out.
Yeah.
But yeah. And like we were saying with over threshold, are you, in your, what I can do for 5 minutes over threshold, or are you like, 30 seconds over threshold? Like there's a big difference there. That's going to be different in power, different in, somewhat different in heart rate. But at the end of those efforts, RPE will be the same. Just how fast does it get there?
Yeah, exactly. But I think when it comes to again, I think it's best if if an athlete, if they've got a coach, that's great. But if they're uncoached, then what you want to do is whatever you're using, use it consistently. Don't be bouncing around from whatever's the new shiny. Well, these zones are all new, so they've got to be better. And just stay consistent. I think consistency is the key with whatever you're doing. Don't be flopping around from methodology to methodology because they're all pretty close.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to, like, if you're self-coached, to educate yourself on what types of zones that might be useful for you. And if you have a coach, don't hesitate to ask them, like, hey, why are we using this type of zone? Or what do you expect to see? I try to do that, and I'm sure you do the same, to educate them beforehand. But like, hey, sometimes we forget or we get distracted by something else we think is important. And
right. And when we've been doing it we've both been doing this for quite a while. There's a lot of times that we're not trying to omit something, but we just, I know I get in a situation where I'm like, well, I didn't talk about that because I just assumed everybody knew. And unfortunately, that's not the case.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody doesn't know everything. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't.
Definitely the longer you do something, the more you forget other people may not know what you know.
Yeah, exactly. So. Exactly. All righty. That's a wrap, buddy.
Excellent.
So I'm Larry with the Fix Studio.
I'm Mike with Durner Performance, and this was the prologue.
We're out.
Have a great day.